Well, here I am in my Conversations to Thrive. It's just me at the moment, having some troubles with WebEx, but I'm just going to have a chat anyway. If someone else joins in, then so be it. They can just join in the conversation as they arrive. So, Conversations to Thrive, what does that even mean? When we talk about thriving, we talk about surviving. I think thriving is a word that carries kind of a real sense of body for us. You know, when someone says that they want to thrive, it's not just about being healthy. It's not just about surviving. It's about being full, being free, really enjoying life. I suppose the word flourish is another key one that goes in line with the idea of thriving. So at the moment, one of the reasons I wanted to start having these conversations to thrive was because it's a tough time for people. You know, there's a lot of people who are isolated. Certainly here in Melbourne, a lot of people who are having to constrain themselves to their home. And some of us have got family. I've got my kids here and my wife, which is wonderful. But I'm also an introvert, so it means that my space is encroached upon, you know. And for a lot of us, that encroaching, that sense of having the lines blurred can be really offensive to the soul if it goes on for too long. And the flip side, the negative of that is true. There's people who are extroverts who are isolated and they're just not getting exposure to conversations with people, relationships, and even that physicality, that touch. You know, patting someone on the shoulder when you're having a laugh together, let alone having a good hug where you feel connected. All of these things are really impacted by the current situation with the pandemic in the world. And it's important for us all to feel a sense of life in the midst of all that. So, what does it mean to thrive? And I thought I'd share with you something. There's a couple of quotes I thought maybe we could have a read of, if you're interested. So one of those is the one that I quoted in a video that I did the other day, and that one was by a guy called Alan Seiler, who really heads up and has defined ontological coaching here from Australia in a lot of ways, and his book Coaching to the Human Soul. This quote really struck me. It's a really, really potent quote. The issue is learning, he says. That's the heading. It says, from an ontological perspective, humans are not machines. They're not broken and they do not need fixing. Humans are biological systems. As biological systems, we coexist with each other in an environment and continually need to adapt to our environment in order to survive. Biological systems do not get fixed. And this is a key point here. We tend to pathologize. We like to categorize, and that's helpful. Pathology is one of the ways that we have gained an understanding of what it means to heal someone. If there's something wrong with a person, we have a look at the pathology, the underlying mechanisms, the things that are wrong in order to fix it so that the person can stop suffering. One of the issues with that, though, is that we begin to have a conversation that focuses on the issue. It focuses on the suffering. It focuses on the fact that there is an issue and denies the fact that there are multiple other areas where there are no such issues. And this want to pathologize everything, to put everything into a box of what's wrong, it tends to sway our focus away from what's right in a person, away from what's healthy, from what's capable of functioning well. And this is a really important mindset for us to begin to grow into, because when a person comes to me and they say, oh, I've got this wrong and I've got that wrong as a client, or when I start to think that myself, then what happens is we see the world through that filter, and we experience anything that's out of what we think is normal through that filter. Because we observe our world, our way of being, the way we observe our sense of self is going to inform everything that we do. And so I suppose what I'm saying here in this conversation is, in order to thrive, perhaps we can start to look at our sense of self and how that self is viewed by us. Because if we only view ourselves as having something wrong, then perhaps we're missing out on all the things that are good in our life. Perhaps we're missing out on the ability to be in a different way, even though we've got these experiences. And that's why the rest of this quote is really important. Biological systems don't get fixed. He says televisions, washing machines, dishwashers and cars get fixed. Biological systems adapt and learn and heal and evolve and grow. Adapting is not about coping individually, but about learning to cope together. The essence of adapting is learning. And you know, that's it. The essence of adapting is learning. We continually learn from our environment. And the question isn't, do we learn? We always learn. The question is, what do we learn? Because you can learn this thing and you can learn that thing. And sometimes by default we learn this thing, but we could create a new learning over here. And if we could create a new learning, that could mean that we could create a new opportunity to thrive. One of the things that I think about is chronic fatigue and chronic pain that a lot of people have. And there's always a story attached with that, and that story is really important. And often the story is one of suffering and of pain, of restriction. I know for myself, suffering from multiple types of chronic pain and injury, shoulders, back, knees, all sorts of chronic things in my life. And I could submit to those and submit to the story that says something's wrong with me. And sometimes I do, I walk around, oh, this hurts, oh, that hurts. There's nothing wrong with saying that. What happens to me though, and you might relate to this in your own way, I don't know. What happens to me though is if I keep talking about that story, then I start to only see that story and I look for evidence that that story is true. And that doesn't lead me down a pathway of thriving. Whereas, if I look for what I can do, that can lead me to a state of thriving, a state of flourishing. So for example, sure, I've got a sore shoulder, okay, so I can't do the things I want to do. I might have trouble wielding a sword, or I might have trouble doing a particular exercise. The question I ask myself and I ask my clients at that point is, well, what can you do? And it's just a sort of flip in our mindset. Instead of saying, what can't you do? We say, what can you do? Instead of saying what I am incapable of doing, I begin to look for the things that I am capable of doing. And you know what? Yeah, I can't do all the things I want to do. All right? I can't. And there's a lot of things I want to do. What can I do? Can I go for a walk? Can I sit down and have a chat with someone? Can I do a few push-ups? Can I do a few sit-ups? Can I stretch? What can I do? Not what can't I do? Because then I start to move into action instead of inaction, and I start to move into experience that's positive and affirmatory rather than experience that is suppressing and depressing to me. So I'd be curious to see, how might you begin to ask the question of yourself, what can you do, rather than what can't you do? Because that's key. Because right now there are a lot of things that we can't do. So many things we can't do. And a flourishing life is a life that has a sense of agency. And that's what I'm talking about here. Agency is your capacity to make the change for yourself. And agency is closely connected to this idea of efficacy, self-efficacy, the belief that I am capable of making that change occur. Efficacy is your belief in your capacity to do the thing that you need or want to do. And so if all we're doing is focusing on the things that we don't want to do, then it's very difficult for us to see the things that we can do. Whereas if we start to train our attitude to look at the things we can do, then we can begin to do those things. And once that happens, we start to build efficacy. We start to build a sense of agency, because little successes start to occur, and then another success, and they build one on top of another. And as we build those successes with what we can do, then we start to feel like we could do more. And all of a sudden, we can start to have this spillover effect where the success, the sense of mastery, of self-mastery, the sense of little successes building on top of each other over here can spill into other areas. And that leads to a sense of flourishing in life, a sense of thriving, because we gain agency, we gain the belief that we can do X, Y, or Z. Or we gain the belief that, you know what, maybe I can't do that, but I reckon I could learn to do that. I reckon I could teach myself to do that. And that only happens because we train ourselves to practice over here and then to believe that we can apply that same skill of learning in a new arena. And I know it's hard. You might have seen an article that I wrote called, I can't remember what it's called, about failures, about the failures I had at uni and how that's impacted my life for years. And multiple failures impacts our belief in ourselves, impacts our belief that we can do the things that we want or need to do. And so in a time when we feel like agency's been taken away from us, we might be in lockdown, or we might be in isolation, or our job might have disappeared. We might not be able to hang out with our loved ones, with our friends, or play sport. These are very real pains that we have. And it's important for us to feel them, really feel them. And those pains that we have, those feelings, those senses of loss, grief, it's easy for them to loom large. And when they loom large, we can look in the shadows that they cast and get caught up in the darkness of those shadows. And as I said, it's important for us to feel those emotions. They forge who we are. If, however, we only look at those emotions and we fail to look at the horizon of possibilities. So when you're looking in the shadows, there's this posture of looking down and in and being consumed by that darkness. And when we look up toward the horizon of possibilities before us, our posture can change. We can feel ourselves fill up with a sense of hope. Because yes, things have been taken away from us. Yes, we don't have any agency over a whole bunch of areas of our life. We're out of control. And yet there are things that we can have control over. I can lift my head up and look to the horizon of possibilities. I can do that. You can do that. I suppose I'd ask the question, in what areas now are you feeling the shadow of agency being taken away from you? And the flip side would be, but what possibilities are there that you haven't considered, or that you've considered before and you've let them just kind of dwindle into the background? Put it on the afterburner. Well, we don't want things to be on the afterburner. The back burner, sorry. We want things to be on the front shelf. Front and center, horizons of possibilities. And that's why my motto is one step forward, one breath more. Because sometimes that's all we can do. So what is your step forward? What is that one breath more that you can do? The last couple of weeks, my kids have been watching Frozen 2 a bit. Well, the whole family. We've watched it. We've looked at the wonderful stuff on Disney Plus about how they made the movie, the development of Frozen 2 and the songs. And there's that one song, if you haven't seen it, where one of the characters, Anna, sings it. And she's hit the crisis. There's a real crisis moment in her life. And it's a devastating crisis moment. And the song, she's curled up in this ball, this bundle of hopelessness, of despair. And she realizes that, you know what? She can do one more thing. She can do the next right thing. It's easy for us to get caught up on that word, right. And it's not about right and wrong. It's about getting up and moving forward in a way that creates thriving, health and well-being. If we get caught up on whether this is right or wrong, then we can get caught in what Charlie Brown was accused of from Peanuts, of being caught up in the paralysis of analysis. That's me. That's what I do. I don't know about you, but I get caught up in the paralysis of analysis, and it's not enjoyable. So how do you get out of that? Well, you take one step forward, one breath more. If you're having an anxiety attack, what do? You just take one breath more. You move with your body forward into a new environment. You create a sense of connection between you and the world around you by moving and feeling that movement in your being. One step forward, one breath more. That's all we can do sometimes. And in fact, that's all we can do at any time. We just don't realize it. So for you and I, as we struggle in this world, we can look around and see all the things that have been taken away from us, our loss of agency. And we can look to the things that we can do. What can we do? I can take a step forward. I can breathe slower or faster. I can read something. I can close my eyes and experience this moment in its fullness. I can listen to a beautiful piece of music that transports me to another world. I can do those things. This leads us to a sense of thriving. What else can we do? We can connect with people. We can have a video call. We can have a phone call. It's not the same as meeting up together, but we can do it. Here in Melbourne at the moment, we're in stage 3 lockdown, so we're only allowed to do 4 things. We're allowed to leave the house. There's only 4 reasons we can leave the house: for a medical type appointment, to go and buy food, to go to work if we have to go to work, and to exercise. So I have a friend that I'm going walking with once a week, early in the morning before anyone else is up, so we can walk on the road and be separate enough. We've got enough social distancing, but we can walk and talk with our social distancing while we're doing. We can do that. What can you do? What can you do? What's one thing you can do to help you thrive? To help you connect? One of the things, one of my favourite authors out there is Antonio Damasio. He's a neuroscientist, and I've read all his stuff, and I just love what he's got to say. And it has informed my way of being. It's informed my professional practice. It's informed my personal life and the way I view the world. I mean, this stuff it's really gold. Some of it's really technical, and it's not for everyone, but there's absolute gems woven all through his conception of biology and consciousness and feelings. And in his book, The Strange Order of Things, which is called Life, Feeling and the Making of Cultures, he talks about, he conceives of feeling and emotions differently. Anyone who's spent any time talking with me about this stuff will know that I'm very big on feelings and emotions, but I'm also big on separating out and changing, having a distinction in how we define them. So a feeling is not necessarily an emotion. An emotion is not a feeling. So a feeling is the conscious awareness of an emotion. This is my very simplistic interpretation of it. And emotions, to emote, is to move out from something. So emotions are your bodily response to the world around you. And there's a truckload of science that backs this up now. I mean, not just Damasio, I'm also reading Joseph Ledoux, 2 of his works at the moment. One is The Deep History of Ourselves, which is it takes a similar view to The Strange Order of Things, actually. The progression from simple organisms all the way through to complex over kind of an evolutionary perspective on how we've developed, and looking at the interconnectedness, but also his book Anxiety, which again talks about feeling and emotion and how we manifest as self in the midst of that. But Damasio's book, he talks about thriving, right? So emotion is our bodily response to changes in the internal and external environment, driven by this process called homeostasis. And I was always taught at uni that homeostasis is this space of an internal kind of balance, right? So we never go to extremes. You've got a little thermostat sitting in your brain that's always checking your temperature. So if you get too hot, then it makes changes. If you get too cold, it makes changes. When you get hungry, then you feel hunger because your body is outside of its normal range and it needs food. And then when you eat the food, you feel satiated, so you're satisfied. When you exercise well, then your body feels good at the end of it. If you do stuff that's too hard, then your body gets hurt and it gets injured. So these are all part of homeostasis. In this book, Damasio defines it even further. It's fascinating. On page 24, he starts talking about homeostasis, and on the next page, 25, he's got this wonderful paragraph that I want to read to you now. Homeostasis refers to the fundamental set of operations at the core of life. From the earliest and long-vanished point of its beginning in early biochemistry to the present, homeostasis is the powerful, unthought, unspoken imperative. So it's not a conscious thing. I don't go, oh, I must adjust my homeostasis. I don't even think about it. It's happening at some level inside me that I'm not even aware of. Centrally controlled, but also peripherally controlled. Whose discharge implies for every living organism, small or large, nothing less than enduring and prevailing. So homeostasis is about us enduring and about us prevailing. It's about us living and surviving. It's not about us diminishing, shriveling up and becoming nothing. It's the imperative that drives us to survive, that drives us to live, that drives us to be. Now, we can see this at play in multiple arenas. So if we expand this out to human behavior and relationships, then we can start to see little parallels here. So this drive to endure and prevail, if you feel offended by someone, if you feel like someone is threatening you emotionally, physically, if you don't feel safe because of the way a person is talking to you, you tend to withdraw from them. Withdraw emotionally, you withdraw physically. That's because you fear a threat to your well-being. If you've had a terrible experience with something, then you're less likely to go back there. If you've burnt your finger on a pan, then you're less likely to go back and touch it. When I was a kid, when I was young, a little toddler, I was obsessed with the extension lead on the vacuum cleaner. So my mum would vacuum the floor and I would chase after the extension cord and try and play it and pull it apart. I don't remember this, but this is how the story went. And I used to chase it, and nothing they said or did would stop me from trying to play with it and chase it. But that's dangerous, isn't it? It's dangerous for a kid to want to pull apart electricity while it's alive. So what my dad did, I wouldn't recommend this to anyone, but apparently what he did was he pulled the cord apart a little bit and put a bit of wire or something around it, and so that when I went to do it, he moved it, and this big electric shock occurred, and scared the living daylights out of me, and I never went back there again. So that's our conditioning, our learning, right, process. I didn't touch it, I didn't get zapped. It just made this big sound and flash of light or whatever, and I was scared and wouldn't go there again. I'd learned not to do that. I'd learned that that was dangerous and a threat to me. And so I wouldn't go back there again. This is a concept that a lot of us are familiar with, this idea of learning, this idea of learning by fear, learning by harm, and not wanting to go back to something again. And I think one of the things that's important for us to understand is that process is going on in all parts of our life, not just to do with fear, but to do with joy, with pleasure. And it's when we step outside of our normal ranges for too long into too much pleasure and joy and ecstasy, or too much pain or too much struggle, when we step out of this nice, safe range, that we begin to stop enduring. And it's that fear within us that if someone has done that to us so many times, then we don't want to have anything to do with it. So we have to endure, we have to prevail, we have to survive. Sometimes to do that, we lash out. One of my favorite animals is, my favorite animal is a tiger. I don't like pictures of tigers so much. I just like the real thing. Or illustrations of tigers, that is. I like photos of tigers. And one of the things about tigers is they're not aggressive as such. They don't go out seeking to harm people. What happens with tigers is they're more likely to attack if they're hungry, they're injured, or they're protecting someone. And that's very true of a lot of wild animals. And that's true of humans, right? We lash out, we strike at people because there's a threat to who we are. And at the moment, in this COVID situation, with so much stuff taken away from us, our opportunities to relate to people, our opportunities to go to work and get a sense of identity from it, our opportunities to just go shopping whenever we want, to go to the movies, to go and watch our favourite sports, to have a party with our mates, to go to the pub, whatever it is, all these opportunities, they've been ripped away from so many of us. Our sense of self has been threatened as a result of that. We feel threatened. We feel like we're not going to endure. Now, cognitively, we can say, I'm not threatened, I'm fine, I'm alive. So we can go, well, it's not that bad, rationally. But something inside us has shifted. Our way of being in the world, our observation of what's right and true and good and healthy has shifted because the things we're used to doing have been ripped out. And so there's a threat, there's an existential, an ontological kind of threat to our sense of self and well-being. This is really, really big. As a result of that, we can be like that tiger. We can be more threatened by things than what we normally would be. We can be more full of distress. We can be more irritable, more angry, right? And that stuff isn't stuff we want to be, but we can't kind of help it because of the anxiety that we feel, because of the way we have been threatened, and there's a sense that the things that caused us to live have been taken away. Why is that? Why is it creating that threat within us? Well, one of the reasons is this. All those things that we do, culture, those things that give us life, relationship, all of those things being taken away, well, that's part of our homeostatic sense of thriving. It's not just about enduring and prevailing. Damasio says that further. We read on in that paragraph. Have a listen to this. This is really, really cool. Nothing less than enduring and prevailing was where we finished off. The part of the homeostatic imperative that it concerns enduring is transparent, right? That means we can't see it. It produces survival and is taken for granted without any specific reference or reverence whenever the evolution of any organism or species is considered. In other words, enduring just happens, right? We just live, whatever. We don't see that process. It's transparent to our awareness. The part of homeostasis that concerns prevailing is more subtle and rarely acknowledged. It ensures that, and this bit, he's even italicized this bit, so listen to this. It ensures that life is regulated within a range that is not just compatible with survival, but also conducive to flourishing, to a projection of life into the future of an organism or species. This flourishing is a sense of living another day. When those things are taken away from us in times of isolation and pandemic and all that stuff, then what we've experienced is a loss of those things that cause a flourishing, that speak to our future life. So how we can come back to a sense of connection and flourishing today, well, it's really quite simple. We need to find things that speak to that life of goodness. Whether that's relationships, finding a new way of being in a relationship with someone where you normally can't be, or whether that's finding a new way of exercising. I can't go to the gym and lift heavy weights. I love lifting heavy weights. I can't go to karate and do my training. I love training for 2 hours a week and being put through my paces with my instructor. I love it, right? But I can't do it. I can't get into the city and see all my sword fighting mates. I can't do it. So what can I do? And I know it's hard, but what can I do to reclaim that flourishing? Well, I can get my sword out and just enjoy it outside. I can sit in the sunshine and let that vitamin D soak into my soul, be created as the sun soaks into my soul, right? I can get as much exposure to that as I possibly can. I can find beautiful music and listen to it. I can look at the leaves moving in the trees outside. I can watch beautiful movies. I can do things that I did when I was a kid. At the moment with my kids, we are watching the Gummy Bears series. I used to love that show when I was young, and it's such a joy seeing my kids enjoy it. And we're doing that together, and that's giving us a sense of flourishing and life. To watch them enjoying this thing that I loved as a kid is wonderful. And so my curiosity for you is this. How can you, or in what way can you explore things that create flourishing, things that speak to a future life for you? I get it. I know it's hard. What's that one thing more you can do? Because there's been a breakdown in our life in a lot of ways. But you can create life in new and exciting ways. And I suppose that's what I want to ask. How might you flourish today? This is just one little conversation we've had, one little chat with some reflections from me on what it means to flourish as a human in this life. There are other things that you can do to flourish, other ways that we can thrive, other things that we can talk about that encourage this change, this transformation in us, this growth. And so I'm going to sign off there. And I encourage you to think about thriving. Think about looking to the horizon of possibilities and telling the story about what you can do rather than telling the story of what you can't do. I've recorded this conversation, so I'll post it up on YouTube, which obviously you'll be looking at right now because it's on YouTube if you're watching it. And you can tap into some of these thoughts and get involved in the conversation. I'll be back again next Friday. I'll have my video call open and I'll be recording what I say. If anyone joins me and they have a chat, then fantastic. If not, I'll just talk at the camera for a bit about other thoughts on what it means to thrive and to connect and to be successful and healthy. All right, this is me signing off. Thanks for coming.